being here. We're really excited to be in some ways kicking off some new work, but in a lot of other ways just continuing a lot of amazing work that's already being done across the state. And so thank you for joining us today. We're going to start just with some quick introductions of our team. I thought, because today is really a celebration of teaching, and a lot of how I think about this work and the pre-educator pathway is really celebrating the profession of teaching and all things teaching. I thought everyone introduces themselves could just share really quickly their favorite thing about their first classroom. And so Kim, if you'll start us off.
Thank you so much, Tory. Welcome, everybody. I'm probably not going to stop smiling maybe all day, but definitely not through this call. So don't be afraid. It's normal. But I think my favorite thing about my very first classroom is that, and I think every teacher knows this, like you literally feel the energy of nothing but endless potential. And I'd never been in a space before where I had felt that way. So I had 13 students my first year. They were students in special education with an exceptionality of emotional disturbances. And it just made me feel like how lucky and how honored that I was to be able to be a part of these young people as their lives were like continuing to grow. And then I got to be a part of where it would go next. So I think that's my favorite part. Like I never felt that type of energy and hope and possibility before in my entire life. And it's just an unmatched feeling. Tory?
Thanks, Kim. Hi, everyone. My name is Tory Hayward. My email address is Toriano Hayward. That's my full name. My first year teaching, I taught 10th grade English on a hallway completely by myself. There was no other classroom on the hallway, but it was right across the hall from the librarians. And so I actually ended up, most teachers, I feel like, were struggling to figure out like how to use the librarians and how to use the library the best way. And it was actually ended up being a really amazing resource. And I created like really lifelong friendships with the librarians, which I don't think usually happens in your first year teaching. But they really saved me and answered a lot of questions. So I'm forever indebted. But hi, everyone. And I'm excited to be here today. Nicole?
Hi guys, Nicole Bono. I also work on the educator development team with Kim and Tory. My first year of teaching was in a 3rd grade classroom in Baton Rouge. And what I remember most about it is just how much I learned that year. First of all, just about the realities of teaching and what that really looks like compared to what you think it looks like after you've completed a prep program and a student teaching experience. And also because I started my teaching experience in Baton Rouge, having grown up in the New Orleans area, I was also just learning a lot about the city and the community. And so it was just such a period of growth for me that I still remember that. And then just in terms of just physical space, I also remember my really awesome reading corner that I had with this great carpet that my principal got for me and like pillows and lots of great books. And I really, really liked that space.
I don't know if Jessica's on the call yet, but Jessica, if you're there.
Yeah, I'm on the call. This is an interesting question for me. I exited college into the workforce, not in the educational sector. I was a graphic designer and web developer, and I didn't like it. And so I entered into the education industry while I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. I entered in not thinking that 18 years later, I'd be leading the state's CTE programs. So for me, my kind of light bulb that first year in my classroom was really towards the end of the school year when I was closing my door, headed into the summer, and really starting to think for the first time that this is something that I wanted to do with my life, that the skills that I developed in college and in the workforce was something that I didn't necessarily wanted to pursue as a career, but rather share with students to allow them to develop their own careers. So for me, I guess that is where really that first year in my classroom, the day and the moment that stands out to me.
Thanks everyone for sharing. I see a ton of people, some familiar faces, a lot of new faces. I would love for everyone just to take a second in the chat to introduce yourself, say where in the world you are. And if you want to, say really quickly your favorite thing about your classroom. I would love to see who all we have in the room before we move on. Great. Hi, everyone. Thank you. Please continue to keep doing that. Really, we see this launching this pathway as really an opportunity to really form a coalition of people across the state that are really thinking about this work. So continue to please introduce yourselves and connect with each other through the chat throughout. Our agenda for today, we're going to start off with just really thinking about why a pre-educator pathway and why that may be of interest to you and your school system. We're going to talk about specifically the Louisiana pre-educator pathway. And then the part that's really exciting is, well, it's all really exciting, but the part that's even more exciting, we'll talk about some support systems that will be in place throughout this next year to help folks really expand this opportunity. We'll then spend some time actually talking to some folks who have already been doing this amazing work in the state and really picking their brains. Thank you all for being here. I can't wait to hear from you. And then we'll close out with some ways for you to stay engaged and continue building this work.
Awesome. All right, thank you so much for that, Tory. And what's so exciting about this call, I don't know if you're looking through the chat as people introduce themselves. There's just such a cool spirit already because we see that there are students on this call, college students, a couple of high school students. We see people from teacher prep programs and people who are teachers teaching the class and district personnel and CTE organizers and school counselors. And I just feel like what a glorious team and a glorious space for us to all be able to be together to talk about how each person has a responsibility and now opportunities to make sure that we ensure really talented, highly qualified teacher pipeline for future generations. So we're going to start off today by talking a little bit about why we knew we needed a pre-educator pathway. And it is not lost on me that there were many people in this state working towards this for many, many years. Some of them are on this call. Some of them have already sort of launched grow your own programs sight unseen because the need was so acute in their area. But we do want to make sure that everybody's on the same page because I think it gives us all grounding and it helps sort of validate what we're seeing in our spaces. And some of you, you may see it in ways that the rest of us don't, especially if you work with HR actual hiring. So we wanted to start off by telling you about the challenges for our pipeline. And I'm sure any teacher prep program can attest to this. We've had a 35% drop in teacher prep enrollment in the past 10 years. So whenever we talk about hiring, we can't hire who's not there. And we know that that leads to a lot of very negative effects in schools in terms of trying to provide continuity of educators for our students. We also know that over 81% of our teacher workforce is white, or over 50% of our students are students of color. And we know that this is a national sort of mismatch. And we know that whenever our students are exposed to diversity, all students, that it yields really beneficial outcomes for students and teachers and communities. We also know that we've got shortages in key content areas. So even if you happen to work in a space that doesn't seem to have lots of teacher shortage, it may be because you're in a space that you're not in a content area or an environment geographically that it really speaks to like it does for others. And then we also know that there's a wide variance across teacher prep programs. So some of the challenges in the past about scaling grow your own programs, because we know that certainly Louisiana has tried and certainly nationally there's been lots of ways. But whenever it comes time to scale programs, what research shows is that number one, there's been sort of universal inconsistent or unclear expectations. So programs not really knowing what was it to be good. How are we measuring it? Was it enough to just fill the seat, or was it enough, or was it more important to sort of track through, and what did high quality look like? We also have a very limited footprint. So it was very difficult if I was in West Baton Rouge to find out what anybody else in the state was doing, or the country for that matter, because there was not a lot of connectivity. Limited constituency or partners. So not enough of outside people or stakeholders knowing just how critical this was, where they could actually put their money where their mouth was whenever we talk about providing high quality education. And then we also had a lack of best practices, a lack of evidence for that. Lots of research gaps in terms of what's effective and what's not. So we really tried to build this from the ground up, understanding these challenges so that we could plan for sustainability and ultimately plan for success. So over the next few slides, I'm just going to break it down for more Louisiana, because it's important that you know, like, this data and our program and the way it's designed is really set up to meet the needs of our state, like a true grow your own should be. So first of all, Louisiana, our numbers they mirror nationally. In some ways, they're actually a little bit better, but still not nearly good enough. But for us, over this past year, 73% of our teacher workforce doesn't reflect the percentage of our students of color in the classroom. And we know that we've got teacher shortage across the board. And so as we look to intentionally recruit, we have an opportunity to be able to recruit for more diversity, to know that this is a need. Okay, this is also important, and I know HR directors have to grapple with this all the time, but we know that almost a quarter of our teachers are teaching out of field, or they're teaching uncertified. And that's a best case scenario. There are lots of cases too where we're hiring long-term subs, or we're hiring people with no degree at all, or an associate's degree. So we know that this is a huge need across the board, because even if we can get teachers, we're not really getting them to be able to match the needs of the demands of the classrooms that they're placed in. Okay. We also know, and it's important to continue to say this, that it's really our middle school, our secondary sciences, math, social studies, special education, major areas of need. We know that rural areas and urban areas, like, those are our needs. And I keep saying this because I think that if we have an opportunity to be able to really grow or repair a pipeline, then we need to start with the actual needs, like any good teacher would do. What's the outcome? And then how do we backwards design to be able to meet that need? So whenever it comes time for you to start your grow your own programs, being transparent about where the needs are so that it's clear to students from the start is so critical, so that they're not shocked when they graduate, that whenever they went to school to be a second grade elementary teacher in the suburbs, that there's no jobs for them. So that's important. And it's something that we should lead with, because other fields have gotten this right. Where's the need? How do we identify just the right person ahead of time, and then support their development to make sure that need is filled? Okay. And then we also want to share with you that 44% of teachers who completed a teacher prep program, it still speaks to that need. We're seeing it overwhelmingly in early childhood and early in elementary education. And we know that that's a huge mismatch. So if you look at this, we see that what we're producing is not filling the need, and we're already not producing enough teachers. So again, if we've got a shot to really make this right, it's so important that we're all together to know it's okay to recruit for exactly the positions that we need, so that we're not oversaturated in areas that we don't, and kind of sell an unfair vision to people who want to be teachers. And then overall, whenever we take a look at just sort of everything, I always like to put real numbers to things. It's the nerd in me. But whenever we speak to where shortages are and all the classes that we have in school and the different pathways and opportunities, and knowing how lacking we've been in terms of education, in terms of these extra opportunities for students, by the year 2030, there's going to be a global shortage of about 4 million 4 million doctors. And we know that that's a huge space, right? 4 million that's a massive number. Most of those numbers for doctors and the needs are in developing countries. I also think it's interesting because we've implemented so much around engineering and pre-engineering pathways. By the year 2030, the shortage of engineers is going to be around 2.2 million, again, mostly in developing countries. But what we never talk about, and now we're finally going to look to staff, is the fact that by 2030, there's going to be a need for 69 million teachers. And that's something that we never, ever hear. So what does it look like whenever we flip how we train teachers and how we make students aware where the actual needs in their world are, where their communities are, and match them according to what we know that they are good at? And we do that sooner, right? So that we know that we're actually attending to their needs early. We know it takes years to become a great teacher, and we know we've got to start sooner. So now I'm going to turn it back to Tory so we can tell you a little bit. Actually, I think Jessica is going to be able to really explicitly get to the actual pathway to kind of walk us through that so we can all understand it a little bit better. And then Tory is going to be able to come and talk about how you can look to implement this in your school with our new opportunities. So Jessica?
Well, and actually, just before Jessica jumps in, you had it right the first time.
Tory?
All of that data, right, that Kim just shared, and thank you, Kim, for sharing it, really kind of, I think, led us to really three pretty clear ideas or beliefs about building this pre-educator pathway across the state. First, that the next generation of Louisiana's educational leaders are currently sitting in our desk right now. I think there's a statistic, Kim, correct me if I'm wrong, something like 60% of teachers end up teaching within like 50 miles from where they themselves went to school. And so if we really think about the students we have in desks right now, what the opportunity currently is to start those students on a pathway into this profession, how amazing, how exciting that could be. The second belief is really that the underrepresentation of teachers of color in Louisiana's educational workforce can be addressed through high quality early career development. And so this pathway that Jessica is going to walk us through, you'll certainly see that high quality career development embedded there with the intention of really starting to pick away at some of the gaps that currently exist in our workforce. And lastly, kind of where I started off the call, and just really this being a celebration of the teaching profession, but our belief here is really that strategically expanding access to the profession will overall benefit retention and quality of teachers. And so let's go ahead and just dig in to what that pathway actually entails.
Excellent. Thanks, Tory. I want to start with, I love seeing so many CTE supervisors on this list. There's a lot of familiarity in those names I'm seeing. So for my CTE supervisors, I genuinely appreciate y'all jumping on this call to hear about this. So the Louisiana Pre-Educator pathway was initially approved in 2019. And the pre-educator pathway sits in our category of a K-16 pathway, right? Those K-16 pathways really give students the foundation needed to make the next step in their educational pursuits, whether it be with LCTCS, a four-year university, or get some education under their belt in order to step out into the workforce. That first iteration of the Louisiana Pre-Educator pathway in regards to IBCs really did focus on some of what Kim was talking about with the need for engineering and STEM careers. We all know that there are a lot of STEM careers and a lot of jobs out there within the STEM category. And so that first iteration of the Louisiana Pre-Educator pathway, those state credentials were in the CompTIA and CIW family. In the fall of 2020, led by Kim and a couple of industry partners, the pre-educator, the level 1 and level 2 pre-educator credentials were brought and approved to the state focus list. What this means is now in our state, these credentials will be in that 110 and 150 category. You know, they've always been able to be provided by students, but we know when we incentivize these credentials, the urgency with which to get them to students becomes elevated. So now this pathway includes that STEM focus, which we know if there are jobs out there for STEM individuals or if for the STEM sector, that we as educators need to be prepared to educate those students so that they are prepared for those jobs. But now what we have are IBCs that are directly tied to the educational industry, whether it be in mathematics or humanities or whatever that student wants to pursue, that are now available to those students and school systems relative to their SPS points. So this, Kim kind of went a lot into why this is important for our state and why this is important for our students. That homegrown component of our educator workforce is vital. And just to, if you give me a moment of personal privilege, you know, I began my education career in City of Baker schools, but was born and raised in St. Bernard Parish. And after really like digging into and understanding that education is where I wanted to be, I found myself gravitating to my home, that I wanted to go back to St. Bernard and teach in St. Bernard and lead in St. Bernard. And I think this pre-educator pathway is going to allow us to really capture those students, invest them in the school system prior to them going into their post-secondary. So that way, when they're done, we can sweep them back up. And what we have is an educator workforce that understands the community, teaching in the community. And so I think that this pre-educator pathway is going to allow school systems to catch that pipeline prior to entering college versus after exiting college. And I think that's going to be really powerful for school systems that build out this pathway. Next slide, Tory. Right, so Kim, did you want me to present on this one? I'm sorry. Okay, so the pre-educator is a K-16 pathway. This varies slightly differently from your standard Jumpstart 2.0 or Jumpstart 1.0 pathways. Typically for Jumpstart, traditional Jumpstart pathways, you've got a listing of IBCs that the students can earn, and then a listing of a large bucket of courses, and school systems can pick any combination of those those bucketed courses to complete the pathway. With K-16, we've got a slightly different organization to the pathways. There are going to be a couple of different buckets. There are going to be the required courses. So for the pre-educator pathway, the two courses listed here, the multicultural learning communities and foundations of education, are going to be required to complete this pathway. Then you've got the students can take from a bucket of psychology classes or child development, and then from cyber society, technology education, or an AP computer science. So the students are going to have to take 4 from that top bucket. Then when we run down into the remaining 9 classes, the remaining 5 classes, sorry, my math was off. The remaining 5 classes you're going to need for a Jumpstart student, that career education, that career preparedness class. And then students will get to pick from a concentration of classes. So if a student is interested in, let's say, the humanities, there is a grouping of English, history classes, even into Braille and assistive technology classes that they can pick from, algebra, etc. Then the second concentration is going to be the STEM concentration. And so this is going to be for your students who want to go into the educational sector, really teaching within the STEM fields. So those are going to be in the realm of your engineering and computer programming, networking, security. And then what also exists is a large bucket that students can pick electives from an additional career readiness or just general other bucket where they can pick up to 2 credits. So my CTE supervisors are a little bit more familiar with this kind of distinction between regular Jumpstart and K-16 Jumpstart, but I kind of want to delineate out that for members of the audience who aren't immersed in Jumpstart on a daily basis. The last part I wanted to hit on is really the the potential of how you are going to engage students fully in this pathway. You know, through some of the content, students are going to get those internship opportunities that are embedded in some of those required courses. But also this would give you an opportunity to really establish some extracurricular opportunities, right? How can you leverage these students who want to be teachers to do something like a tutoring program or assisting your current instructors with work that they do? The opportunities are really limitless when you have someone in your school who wants to be an educator, meeting with their potential future colleagues on a daily basis. So I'm really excited, this launch that Kim is doing, what innovation and really forward thinking of this create your own mentality is going to come out of school systems.
Thank you so much, Jessica. I believe Jessica needs to leave a little early. So if you have any questions, this is actually a good halfway point before we jump into the supports that the department will be offering for the next year. If you have any questions for Jessica, feel free to drop them in the chat, or you can unmute yourself, and we'll just pause for a couple of minutes here if anyone has any questions about anything we've talked about so far.
Hi, Jessica. This is Antonise. How you doing?
Good. How are you doing?
Good. My question is, when you talked about the STEM component of it, would that be a required class that they would have to take? Because I'm thinking about that kid that may not want to go into the STEM, don't want to go into education through the STEM courses. So
absolutely. Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Antonise.
Oh, no. Would that be mandatory for them to take a STEM course?
Absolutely not. What was ingenious about the initial development of this pathway is that concentration tracks were created. So there is a concentration track for STEM that if you've got a student who wants to be a STEM educator, those are the courses you take. Whereas if you have a student that wants to be in a core academic, they'll be able to take that core academic track. So STEM is not a requirement, and I'm sorry if my wording insinuated that, but it's absolutely not. It is a track option for students.
Jessica, it's Stacy Alexius. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Stacy. Hey.
Good. How are you?
Lovely. Good to see your face and name on this call.
Well, listen, about the statewide credentials, in order to get the the higher level statewide credentials, right now only the STEM options really are available. The CIWs and the CompTIAs. Is there a possibility of there being other credentials later to the previous speaker's point? If students want to be a kindergarten teacher or a band teacher or something like that, they aren't necessarily going to gravitate towards these computer courses, which are the only opportunity for us to get advanced statewide credentials on this pathway.
Yeah, Stacy, great question. So the pre-educator level 1 and level 2 were approved to the state focus list. After next week's BESI, we'll be updating the pre-educator document to reflect as such. So you will have that in writing in a front-facing document shortly after next week. I don't know the exact timeline. I'm sorry.
That's okay. No, that's good to know. Thank you very much.
Yeah, in regards to enhancing this pathway with additional IBCs, I say reach out to Kim's team to discuss what opportunities there are. Stacy, you're very familiar with the process to bring things to focus list. So once you work with Kim's team to develop a plan, then at that point, Kim will engage either me or the Workforce Investment Council for the next steps. Luckily, Kim joined LDOE shortly before we brought the IBCs to the state focus list. So she is a bit familiar now with the process and the role that we play at LDOE.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Not a problem. I do.
So I have a quick question about the logistics. Just understanding the expectation in terms of the internship, considering both the fact that as districts, we have partnerships with online universities as well as brick and mortar campuses. I don't understand the expectations in terms of high school students, and then how does that transition when they become college students, considering the fact that in my head, my thought process is that they are going to get some of that pre-work in high school as opposed to the first 2 years of college. So I'm trying to break down, one, how does internship look at the high school level? Two, how does that look? Because some of our online providers require that these students get hours in classrooms starting their first year all the way to their final year. Two, brick and mortar requires students to have a year-long residency their senior year. And so I'm trying to figure out from an HR perspective, when is hiring acceptable? When can they get paid? And then how do we support them in terms of internships? I'm sorry, that was a lot, but I was trying to get all that out.
No, that was really good. Those are really great questions. I would like to introduce some of our guests only because they'll be able to speak to that. And I want to make sure that Jessica could leave. But the internship's actually really easy because it's a part of class time. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but whether it's, and we're actually learning that right now with virtual, but because whenever it's time for that, and the way that it's like sectioned off, it's not every day. They're still having coursework at, in their course, and then they're applying it throughout the internship year in course 2. But it's substantially easier than it would be because it's actually embedded into the class time where they would then go observe classes during that hour and then come back. And there's so many different ways to plan that. It's truly a grow your own thing. So that might be a question that Tory and I could help design to meet, just because I've seen so many districts that have started it that do that in such a different way.
This is Dr. Ellender with St. Landry, and I would just like to say we do have, and I'll get with Ms. Dunbar, we do have internship programs, so I can explain that better to her how we do that.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Right.
there are a lot of HR people. A lot of CTE supervisors are running internships in other CTE programs. And so I would maybe leverage them if this question of how do you develop an internship program, because they may have already solved some of the questions through, let's say, their ProStart program, which requires work hours, or their Jumpstart Summers programs, or welding, carpentry, IT. A lot of them have solved these problems already within their school systems. So if you're an HR person that is curious of how to tackle this, your CTE supervisor is going to be a great starting point for internship programs.
Great. Thank you so much, Jessica. I know you need to run, so thank you so much for being here. And again, as you are all probably seeing, we're all really excited about this work. And so I'll definitely give you contact information and all of the ways you need to know to get in touch with us after today. Because if you're like me, you'll probably think of questions, as you're washing dishes later. So let's go ahead and jump into the really, we are in the year of really expanding this work. And so I'm excited to talk through a couple of the supports that will be available over the next year as folks are starting to expand the access to the pre-educate pathway. So our supports will really be focused in 4 areas. So funding, which we'll talk about here in a second. And then we're really realizing that staffing, curriculum, and partnerships are really the other 3 big pieces that we can provide support and help folks through the process of expanding. We'll start with funding. So the funding We do have funding available for school systems that are interested in expanding student access to the pre-educator pathway or a Grow Your Own initiative. Systems may request funding for up to $10,000, and we'll go through here in a second of what that money may be used for and how you could create a budget for this. All of the funding recipients would agree to offer at least one of the pre-educator pathway courses with the intent of offering the second one in the following year. Select a qualified instructor by March 1st of this year. Use recruitment techniques that would ensure that a diverse population of students enroll in the course. And we'll talk a little bit more about the use of the word diverse there and why we think that's important to the success of this program. Again, strategically recruiting students to enroll in the course. Kim, I've learned a lot from Kim and her implementation, and this recruitment piece I think will be really where the success of your program kind of hinges. Also, other supports will be offering some ways to reflect and really think about the expansion in a way that we can continue to scale this work in future years. So if a school system is interested in applying, the application is linked in this deck, and we'll share the deck, and they can also reach out to Believe and Prepare to request a copy of the application. The application is also posted for those of you who are familiar in the Believe and Prepare library. And we have a new, really exciting, shiny pre-educator pathway webpage that we'll share the link to, where it's also posted. Those applications are due on January 29th. And we also in the application, it lays out the timeline for using the money and all of that stuff. Here's a sample budget just to kind of lay out some things that the money could be used for. Kim, do you mind talking through just kind of the pieces of this and why these pieces were on your mind and why these might be good options for ways to spend this money?
Right. And again, I'm going to preface this by saying this is just a sample if you're going to apply for this funding. And the other thing that I wanted to say is this call really has two purposes. One, it was to tell you a little bit about the pre-educator pathway, and then separately that we also are able to have people apply for funding. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't look to still implement this pathway. It's just our funding comes from a grant and it's limited. I just want to say that, like, please still apply. So this is just a sample budget. And so whenever you see the allocation on the side, there's only one number on there that's like a hard, fast number. So for example, and you could even sort of use this, but PD itself, we're going to be doing teacher trainings for Teacher Leader Summit, and districts, this wouldn't come out of your seat allocation. I just want to let you know that. But so for example, if you're going to put something for PD for the teacher or for anybody who might be affiliated with this course, you can maybe put that. If you're going to implement the Educators Rising curriculum, then you would definitely want to put that on there, because like I said, that is that $6,500 is the cost of that curriculum, and that goes directly through Educators Rising. I put here, like, for example, like for the micro credentials, if you wanted to use this dollar allocation for that, the micro credentials are $35. So you might kind of round and think of how many students you might have. Of course, if you got, 10 students, you wouldn't need quite as many. And then club dues, because Educators Rising is a national club, like FFA or any of the clubs that we've got would be. We just kind of rounded it $10 a student. Let's just say you had 20, being super ambitious. So this is, again, just a sample, but that is what funding would look like. It's not super detailed, and it doesn't have to be. So just want to encourage you you could use this, you could scale down the numbers. The only number on this particular sample that we have no control over is the one that's directly through Educators Rising.
And there is a question in the chat, Nicole, that I think you can speak to really quickly. Other approved curriculum for the pathway.
Oh, was that question for me? I was too busy drinking.
I'm sorry, I said Nicole, I meant Kim.
Oh.
I was
unmuting to say, I think we should ask him that question.
Well, because the major effort is really grow your own programs. And because we're at the beginning of that, Educators Rising is what we tested. It's what we tested and applied and piloted. But previously STAR, and I saw somebody put that on the call, we actually have teachers that are teaching STAR and have transitioned to Ed Rising also on this call. It's not, at this point, it's not about approved or not approved. It's like, let's implement this pathway in your school. And then I think it wouldn't be fair to talk about a grow your own program if you found something that's way better for your area. And I think about if you're really getting creative, if you're in a really strong like TAP district, for example, I don't see any reason why, NIET and a good strong master teacher couldn't design something from scratch. So it's as long as they can get those micro credentials, which are very clear in what they are. I think that, by the nature of an innovative program and an innovative design to grow your own, that's what should lead, like that essence is what should lead the implementation. But those course codes is what would have to have the class designed for. I hope that helps.
Yeah, and that's a great segue into this next piece. So even if you don't apply for funding, or if you apply for funding and aren't granted funding, there are other supports that are happening over the next year for questions exactly like the one about curriculum. And so beginning in April of 2021, we'll begin leading webinars that will be focused on a series of topics. Some of those topics are listed here on the slide, that for us all really to figure out what are the best practices, who's doing really great work, and how can we expand that work. We'll talk about strong techniques that teachers are using in the classroom and course instruction. We'll talk a little bit, we'll dive into issues related to the teaching profession. And then also a really important piece of this that will also hopefully be able to make easier for everyone is we'll start to facilitate and help creating partnerships across university partners and school systems where that need exists. One thing that I would love for everyone to do, and I'll do this at the end of the call so we can, because we have some guests here today that I'm really excited for everyone to hear from. I will drop this link to the survey in the chat at the end of this call. And I'm going to start a contact list for specifically for this work. And so to get your name and your email address on that contact list, I'll have you fill out that survey at the end of the call today. You're muted, Kim.
It might be for the best. No. So I know we may not get a chance to listen to every guest, but I also want to just reiterate that we're still here to support everybody. And I have a feeling like, 30 districts will have 30 approaches. And I think that that's a really good thing. But I would like to introduce a few people that are on the call. And I would like to actually start with students on the line because we currently have several students who have now made it through and applied to a school of ed and are now like actually enrolled. We have some as far along as sophomores right now. So one of those on the line is Braxton Michelle, and he is actually a part of Southeastern right now. And then we also have a high school student. Her name is Nala, and she's going to be telling you a little bit. I think she's ducking into some corner of school right now. So she got an hour. So we want to make sure that she's able to share her experience. And then we also have two teachers on the line. We have a supervisor of secondary education that's been really instrumental in kicking this off. And then we also have Dr. Weems on the call, who's been an incredible partner in the driving force of the pathway itself, and then in getting Monroe area schools connected. So she also has a wealth of information about implementation for that particular area. So I'd like to start with Braxton. If you could just share a little bit about this series of courses that you've taken before the pathway was approved. Could you tell us a little bit about you?
All right. So my name is Braxton. So my junior year of high school, the very end of my junior year of high school, Ms. Ecker came to me and was like, "You want to be a teacher, right?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she was like, "All right, well, I'm going to put your name down for this class that we're starting." And I had no idea that class was going to lead me to where I am today. And I knew I wanted to be a teacher, but that class was fantastic. Like, it was amazing. I can't stress that enough. So, and whenever they brought up the question about the internships in high school, my second semester of my senior year, whenever we were taking Ed Rising, they allowed me to student teach with a freshman English class. And actually Nala was in that class. And whenever, I watched her and I was like, you know what? She needs to be in Ed Rising. She'd be perfect for it. And one of my big goals at Southeastern and starting Educators Rising Collegiate and being a main leader in that organization is to recruit teachers of color. And especially I want to branch out more to the LGBTQ plus community and, get, those queer teachers into the profession and also, rope those people of color into the profession as well, because the reality is we have those students in our classrooms and they need to be represented by the teacher workforce. So yeah, that's me. I started Educators Rising Collegiate at Southeastern Louisiana University, and I'm a sophomore mathematics education major. I want to teach high school math.
All right. And Braxton, could you actually introduce Nala?
Oh, like I said, Nala was in that English class I was talking about. She was a freshman. I believe she's a junior now. She's a junior or sophomore now, junior now. And yeah, she, so I graduated that year. And then the next year, whenever I brought the Educators Rising Collegiate group to visit, she was in that class and I didn't know that yet. And it was amazing. It was an amazing moment to reconnect. So Nala, it's yours.
Oh, wait, Nala, I hear you faintly, but might need to turn your volume up.
No, it's still a little faint. Do you have any headphones with you, Nala?
Or maybe just crank the volume up on your end or get closer to the microphone. No, it's still a little rough. So let's see if we could fix sound on your end. And then I'm just going to introduce everybody to Tammy Hopkins and Justin Overacre, who I'm sure probably everybody on the call knows for so many of the initiatives that he's a part of. But these two are teachers who have taught this course. They partnered a lot with Dr. Weems in the northern part of the state for the pilot. And I think they really just speak to the dynamic nature and the power of having someone in the environment that the students are in with the energy level of these two teachers to really pull off this course. So Tammy, could you introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Tammy Hopkins. Sorry about the lighting. My office is like a big sunroom, so I just got windows everywhere. But yeah, last year I had the opportunity to teach the program. I didn't know what to expect, but I fell in love with it. The counselors kind of sent out some information to the teachers about who they thought might want to be educators. And so we lucked up with a few beautiful, I think I had 5. It ended up with 5, but the learning experience, it was just amazing. I had some kids to come in that they're like, well, I don't know about the class, but I'm going to give it a shot. And by the end of the year, they loved it. Mind changes. I mean, the mind just shifted. One girl was like, well, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't even think this class was going to be about me. And so now she was like, yes, I've learned so much. I want to be a teacher. And I would put out videos weekly if anybody wants to look at some. I haven't gotten any for this year yet due to COVID. It's kind of been an experience for us, but if you go to the Neville High School Facebook, there's an Educator Riser page, and there's just videos of everything that we discussed over the year. And I think I might have one student that is, I got to reach out to him. He's a freshman in college, but he might still want to go that route. I'm not sure, but we'll find out. But it's a wonderful program. And even the students that I have this year, they're excited. We're getting ready to do some virtual teaching. We're going to go into the classroom, do some observation. I'm going to hook up with some of my colleagues in the area, and hopefully they will allow them to teach some classes as well. but it's a wonderful program. I highly recommend it. I'm come from a second generation of educators. My parents were educators. I said I didn't want to go into education because I saw the negative part of it. I actually graduated in something else, but here I am 20 years later teaching, and I love it.
Thank you so much, Tammy. We love you. All right, Justin.
I actually, Miss Hopkins and I actually taught together, and I actually taught her daughter, and I had the privilege of teaching with her dad and Miss Hopkins, and I can tell you they are beautiful, magnanimous people. So I love you, Miss Hopkins. So I don't know if anybody else had this experience, but when you were young, did you have somebody that told you you need to be a teacher? That light that goes inside of you when somebody tells you that makes you feel so much belonging, especially if you don't look or act like someone that might be the cookie cutter definition of a teacher. I had somebody like that, and I'm still in contact with that person, and they really pushed me throughout my journey in college and high school to be a teacher. And I really think that is what Educator Rising does. It helps us along the journey with each and every student say, hey, how are you doing? You know, pushing them along and saying, you're going to do this. You're going to be a stunning teacher. And I just second what Braxton says. We need diverse teachers. We know the statistics, and we need diverse teachers. I think Tory said it earlier that 60% of teachers teach within 20 miles of where they went to school. So the students that we have 12 Educators Rising students at Wasserman High School in Monroe, Louisiana. And it's a range. We have 5 that really want to be teachers. We have 1 that wanted to be a teacher, but after the class is like, I don't think that I would make a good teacher, even though I think she's going to come back into teaching. And we have some that want to go into the psychological field and the helping field. Bottom line, I think it bolsters advocacy and agency. I think not only does it teach pedagogical content knowledge, but it also teaches really important things about yourself, like equity and bias. And the curriculum, I can't get enough of. When we're not just using it for our Ed Rising students, we're using it for residents, we're using it for teachers, we're using it for administrators, because it teaches about oneself, one's students, and one's community. And I think that's really essential. Thank you so much, Kim.
Well, thank you so much for that as well. And then Nala, is your sound working now? I want to give it another try. No. Okay. Okay, yes. Yeah, so I see a question in the chat box about contact information for teachers currently implementing the program. Absolutely. And we have several in different parts of the state. And so some are teaching virtually, obviously, with COVID, everything's strange. But you might even be able to get a glimpse of some of their classes. And I think that all of them would be very happy to be able to share that information with you, as well as district personnel. Because whenever I tell you, for all the districts that have already piloted, they're doing it all that many different ways. And I think the more you learn about what could be done, the better it's going to make, I think, your confidence that you can get this off the ground in your area too. Nala, one more time, and then keep questions coming in the chat box, please. And I'm going to turn it over. Nala? No, you might need to join from a different Chromebook, maybe. Sorry. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over now to Julie Mayu, because I think that what she'll be able to tell you in terms of like scheduling and funding and just her experience. She's been in education 33 years, and she was working as an assistant principal and then the district level now over the past few years for us getting this off the ground. So Julie, would you be able to introduce yourself and say some things that you think might really help this particular group as they think through this opportunity through funding, but also the opportunity to now implement this pathway?
Yeah, thank you, Kim. And you said you were gonna be smiling all day. Anytime I get to talk about Ed Rising, I just smile all day. So I was in it from the ground up with Kim from her first link she sent me to look at Rising. But also as a teacher, I taught teacher cadet for a year. We kind of changed it around a little bit. We were implementing STAR after that. So kind of been through the gamut on all of them. But with Ed Rising, I think what Justin said really shapes it very well, that it just changes you as an individual and changes even students' perspective on teaching. But as an assistant principal, as while Kim was teaching there, we kind of had to figure out how we were going to fund this thing. So keep in mind for this, when Kim laid out the sample budget, which was excellent, kind of looks like what it really looks like, honestly, when we put it in. With your curriculum costs and your micro-credentials, you also have e-funding that is very easy to access and to use for that. And with the possibility and our movement into dual enrollment, we know that we have SCA funds that we can use for that as well. So those are critical components that the money is there for you to do that, in addition to the supports that LDOE is going to supply. Our biggest challenge was, we could talk about this all day, but we had to figure out how we're going to do scheduling and how we're going to make both of these courses happen. And now we've been challenged even further this year to do that. So with, course 1 and 2, you have to look and get the right teachers, the right students, of course. We embedded it just in a regular, we were on a 7-period day schedule, and we embedded that. But our other school in the district is on a block schedule. So we were able to fit both in there as well. And there are guidelines in terms of the curriculum to teach it under block and to teach it under 7-period days. So I think that'll be important for you. But I also think you just need to be creative. Kim and I talked about it, and she came up with the idea of this year, let's teach it virtually. And it models what so many of our teachers are going through. It's been challenging at times, but it's also been great at times, and trying to learn a different skill set that these kids are going to see that a teacher has to have kind of in our new world that we have today. Creatively also, in terms of enrollment, or maybe the way your school system's set up, we actually pair our 2 high schools together, and the students are in the same course. And now that we've done that with Ed Rising, we're actually looking at doing that with another pathway that we're looking into after talking with our counselors at both high schools. So I think there are lots of different ways for you to get this in. The main thing I'll tell you is, this is actually my 35th year in education. And when I retire, this is going to be the thing that I'm going to be the proudest of, is this program. We love Ed Rising just in our work with it, the passion of it, the teaching anti-bias, classroom culture, the pedagogy. It's just amazing. But again, like Kim said, we have a lot of good teachers out there that can craft what will work well for their individual schools and school systems. Again, I'm being very vague. I'm always available if you have questions, because I've been honored to be in it from the beginning, and absolutely love the work that Kim's brought to the state. So anytime you have questions, just please email me and I'll be glad to help you out.
Thank you so much. And I know that we're running up on noon. However, I also know it's the first call of this nature. So we are recording it for those of you who need to jump off and have a hard stop. I just didn't want to end it, and we still have a couple more questions. So please, you have to keep your school and district running. So you can definitely jump off and do that. But we're going to go ahead. I'd like to hear from a couple more people and have opportunity for questions to come, because it's going to help us think of the guidance around this and the ways that we reach out to you to make sure that you feel support throughout this process. So I think Nala's back. Nala, do you want to give your sound a try again?
It's a little bit better. And right before Nala, for folks who do need to leave at noon, Nicole just put a link in the chat. If you'll just put your contact information there, I'll be compiling that contact list to make sure all information goes out to those folks. So, and also know you can always reach out to Believe and Prepare at la.gov, and we'll get you all of the things you need. Nala, yeah, I think it's a little bit better if you can get really close to the microphone on the Chromebook.
Okay, my name is Nala and I'm a junior at Bully High, and this is my second year.
No, I'm so sorry, Nala. I think you're going to need a totally different Chromebook. But I also want you to have a chance to listen. She's not listed on this slide, but Dr. Amy Weems, some of you have probably already done a lot of work with her, especially in the northern part of the state, because she was really instrumental not only with the pathway in the original form of it and the manifestation of what it is now, but also in working with teachers like Justin and with Tammy and just showing what that partnership looks like with the university. So Dr. Weems, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, it's great to see that this pathway is continuing to grow and that the scale up has great potential. The one thing that I would say for districts and schools is to find a university partner. We are the university partner for both Mr. Overacker at Wassman and Ms. Hopkins at Neville. And leverage that partnership. We actually have MOUs with these districts, and so we've been able to embed some of this Educators Rising and Pathway work into our yearly MOUs between the university and the district. And we look forward to continuing from just coursework to the full pathway in 21-22. We very carefully selected multicultural learning communities and foundations of education as courses that we know many universities across Louisiana into their degree plans. And so the importance of dual credit and dual enrollment for those two courses can really help to transition students from high school thinking about teaching into I am officially in a teacher prep program and I'm ahead of the curve. And so that I think is our growth goal, especially with Neville and Wassman for this year and next, is to really focus on, oh, I've taken these great courses, but I really need to turn my attention to how do I support students in the transition to a teacher prep program. So the university partnerships can be very beneficial for that. I do want to clarify from a question that was asked earlier. For students to get the level 1 or level 2 credentials that were just passed for the core, not the STEM, all you do is complete the pathway the way that it's written. So with level 1, you take all the coursework and you have lots of options to choose from and you pass 2 micro credentials. For level 2, you do the same thing, but you actually complete 2 dual enrollment courses. So you do not have to do like a 1-year CDF internship. That is an option. But within the 2 courses that they take, the multicultural learning and the foundations of education, there are field experiences built in that do include observations, mini teaching, short lessons, and you can kind of have some leeway to, you know, build that out the way you want for your district, but they do not have to do a full 1-year internship for the new pathway that was approved for the state focus list. So if you have questions about that, I will pop my email into the chat if you have any questions about post-secondary partnerships. But I hope you will do the coursework and the pathway. It's been amazing for us.
Okay, thank you so much. Dr. Weems, I do have a question for you, and Nala just put her her response in the chat, and I just wanted to make sure that we honored student voice, and that's why I wanted to make sure we didn't end without hearing from Nala as well as Braxton. And we are going to take any questions out loud and make sure that you're filling out that survey, and Tori's going to tell you a little bit more about that in just a sec. But Dr. Weems, because you work so explicitly with residents and with pre-educators, I think that you're uniquely primed to be able to talk about your observations of this class and what you find it doing differently for those candidates. And that's, I was waiting for you because I wanted to make sure that we communicated why this coursework is so important, and we tested many forms of test work. So that was the question, like what's approved and what's not. It's like, what's effective, do we know, and what's the difference and why this? So could you speak to that, Dr. Weems?
We are so thankful that ULM had already started a pretty significant redesign on our degrees. And we realized the importance of culturally responsive teaching practice and building that early into our program. So when we were introduced to Educators Rising in high school coursework, that was a perfect alignment so that we could use the high school coursework to pair and to offer credit or dual enrollment in those courses that we were building into our degree plans already. And so Mr. Overracker and Ms. Hopkins really took that and were able to give just as rich, just as important an experience for students in those areas. And so I was talking with Ms. Mayu last night about this. We're really trying to reverse engineer our thinking about education. And Tammy, you and I've discussed this. I'm a third generation educator. We're almost 100 years in my family of education. And, you know, when my parents were recruited to teach and my sister, it was like, oh, you're good in English, or, oh, you're good with small children. Let's make you a teacher. But with this Educators Rising paradigm, it's more the reverse of, oh, you want to make a difference in your community. You want to impact the lives of children. Let's find the content area that you are best suited for to accomplish those really important SEL goals in addition to the content that you may be strong in. And so we have seen great connection with our students that are taking the Educators Rising coursework at Neville and at Wassman. The one thing I would also say, and I know Nicole Bono is on this call, is we're strategically implementing Educators Rising and now the pathway at schools where we see diverse populations that need to see more diverse teaching. And so Mr. Overracker is at one of those schools and he's doing great work with that. But you have to be strategic and intentional with both where you want to, you know, partner between the university and the high schools, or the, you know, whatever K-12 partnership that looks like. You have to be intentional about it. You can't just say, oh, you know, hopefully a district will come to us that, you know, has this need or is high needs and high performing. It's not going to work that way. You have to seek them out, go through your MOUs, figure out where that potential is, and go after it proactively. So
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kimberly, for the opportunity.
That gave me chills, or the frissons if you're from Central Louisiana and Cajun, which I am. So I'm going to turn it back over to Tory to make sure we can close out and make sure we get everybody's contact information, and just cannot stress enough how excited we are for just partnership, period. And whatever barrier you think might exist in your district, I promise we can connect you to a district that's faced the same one and came through on the other side. So back to you, Tory.
Thanks, everyone. I used the word coalition at the beginning of the call, just kind of because it was the word that came to my mind. But I really feel, after just hearing so many people and the questions in the chat, and the energy around this is really, really exciting. And so I'm excited to continue this on with this coalition and bring other people and students into this coalition to continue to build. I do want to read just a part of Nala's response out loud, because when we record this, I want her words to be in the recording and the chat won't reflect that. And so Nala, Nala says, I'm currently a junior at Brusley High School. This is my second year in Educators Rising. Ed Rising has helped me mature as a student and as a person. I appreciate all of my teachers more now because I understand that the job isn't easy at all. I never saw all of the work that goes into being a teacher, but I've learned a lot with this class. My first year in Ed Rising was such a growing experience for me. It helped me make better choices because I knew we would have an exciting, important topic to discuss in class and didn't want to miss out. I have so much respect for Ms. Eckert because she believed in me and she pushes me in the right direction and backs me whenever I need someone to, kind of like a mother would do. The class has really helped me find myself and my voice. It's helped me stand up for what I believe in is right while going about it the right way. I didn't even want to be a teacher. I wanted to be an OBGYN because I wanted the money. Something we know she may not be getting in the education field, but you will get so much more. And so thank you, Nala, for sharing that reflection. And I think it's a really incredible note to end on today. Nicole included a survey that we'll use to collect contact information. So I see some folks have put their information in the chat, but if you'll actually click on that survey and put it there, I just want to make sure we don't miss anyone. And then again, we will upload this webinar And all of that information in our new shiny Pre-Educator webpage, which is linked there. And then if you have any questions, as always, please feel free to reach out to Believe and Prepare at la.gov, and we will get you all of the answers you need. And so if I'll stay on and we'll stop the recording. So if folks have any other questions, but thank you all so much for being here today. And I cannot wait to continue this work with each of you. Have a good day. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thank you so much. Okay, is it McManus or McManus?